Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis 11b of Maseches Brachos. We are starting from 5 lines from the bottom of the page. The second word on line is Ve'amar Rabbi Zrika, and the Gemara is discussing a Mishnah in Maseches Tamid that talks about the process of the morning Tamid, and it mentions that when they would prepare the limbs on the ramp of the Mizbeach, they would then go, it was still very early in the morning, and they would go and they would recite, the Mishnah says, the Mamuna, the one in charge, the Kohen in charge, would tell them, Baruchu bracha achas. He would tell them to make a bracha, and they would make the bracha, and then they would read Yasar Sedibros, and Shema, and Vahayam Shemoah, and Vayomer, and the Gemara wanted to know what was that one bracha that they would say. And the Gemara first brought an opinion that it was Avarabba, and now the Gemara has a second opinion for Amar Rabbi Zrika, Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Yotzer Ar, that the Rabbi Zrika said the name of Rabbi Ami and the name of Shimon ben Lakish, that the bracha that they would say in the Beis HaMikdash, the one bracha before Shema, they didn't have so much time, they would say one bracha, and they would say the bracha of Yotzer Ar. Now, Ki Asa Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, when Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar, he said, Hader Rabbi Zrika, Lav befeirish itmar. This teaching from Rabbi Zrika was never said explicitly. Rabbi Zrika never said explicitly that they would say the bracha of Yotzer Ar. Ela michlala itmar. Rather, it can be deduced from something that he said. He said something, and we can deduce from there that he understood that the bracha was Yotzer Ar. De Amar Rabbi Zrika, Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Shimon Lakish, because what he actually did say, Rabbi Zrika in the name of Rabbi Ami in the name of Shimon Lakish, is he said, based on this Mishnah, which says that they would say one bracha, he said, Zos Omeres, this shows you that brachos en ma'akvo zuezu, that the brachos of Shema are not ma'akev each other, which means they don't prevent the other one from working, from fulfilling the obligation. Meaning you might have thought that it's like all or nothing. You have to say both brachos of Shema, otherwise, before Shema, in the morning, otherwise it's like you did nothing. What this teaches you, this Mishnah, which says that they will only make one bracha, is that each one is its own thing, and one bracha accomplishes something too. Now, explains the Gemara that that's what he actually said. He didn't say which bracha it was that they made. He just said that you see from here that the brachos don't prevent each other, they're not ma'akev each other. Now, what did he mean? How did he see from here that that was the case? So, if you say, then it would make sense that Yotzer Ar Havu, that he understood that the one bracha they were making was Yotzer Ar. So, Yotzer Ar Havu Amri, that they would say the bracha of Yotzer Ar, Hainu de brachos ein ma'akvos zuazu. Then you could deduce from here that the brachos don't prevent each other. De lo ka'amri avarabba, because they said only one bracha, they said the bracha of Yotzer Ar, and they didn't say the bracha of avarabba, and you see that one doesn't prevent the other from being fulfilled. Top of the next page, Ela yamart avarabba, but if you would say that he understood that the one bracha they would make was Avarabba havu amri, my brachos ein makvo zuazu. How can you deduce from here that they don't prevent each other from working? Dilma hai delo amri Yotzer Ar mishum delo mata zman Yotzer Ar. Maybe the reason why they didn't say the bracha of Yotzer Ar was because it wasn't time yet to say it. It was so early in the morning that you couldn't yet say praise Hashem for creating light because there was no light yet. And later, when the time for Yotzer Ar would come, they would say it. Then maybe really you do need to say both brachos. Meaning, again, if what they said, if the one bracha, that if Rabbi Zrika understood that the one, or Reish Lakish, I guess at the end of the chain of Mesorah of the report here, if the one bracha that they would say was Yotzer Ar, and they, even though it was late enough in the morning that if they could say Yotzer Ar, obviously they could say Avarabba already. So, and yet they chose not to. So you see that they're not ma'akiv each other, one doesn't prevent the other. But if it was the one bracha that they chose to say was avarabba, but maybe that's just because Yotzer Or didn't come yet, that the light didn't come yet. You can't say that bracha yet, and when it would come, they would say it. So it must be that he understood that from the fact that he deduces from here, from this Mishnah, that the brachos don't prevent each other, must be understood that the one bracha they said was Yotzer Or. Okay, so ask the Gemara, okay, fine. So he didn't say explicitly, he just deduced it. Or we didn't hear him say explicitly, we just deduced it from something that he said. And if we deduced it, then so what? At the end of the day, he seems to hold that way, that the one bracha was Yotzer Or. Says the Gemara, because if it's something that we deduced, well, we have a refutation of that deduction. We don't think you could deduce that from here. Because you could respond in the following way, and you could say, Li'olam avarabba havu amri. Maybe, really, Rabbi Zrika understood, not that they said Yotzer Or, that they said avarabba. Now, what v'chivat zman Yotzer Or havu amri le? And really, when the time comes, and really, you would need to say Yotzer Or later, when the time for Yotzer Or would come. Umay brachos ein makvos uazu. So if he held that the bracha they would say was avarabba, and it was because it just wasn't time yet for Yotzer Or, and really they would say Yotzer Or later, then what did he mean that the brachos are not ma'akiv each other, they don't prevent each other? Could have meant ein ma'akvos seder brachos, that the order is not ma'akev. The order doesn't matter. The order doesn't prevent. Meaning, normally we say Yotzer Or before avarabba. Here the Mishnah says they will only say one bracha. So Rabbi Rish Lakish deduced, you see that the brachos are not ma'akev each other. Now, what it could have meant, explains the Gemara, is what he may have meant, that of course they're going to say both brachos. The one bracha they would say was avarabba. And they're going to say Yotzer Or later when the time comes. It's just too early for it. So what did he mean? That you could deduce from here that the brachos are not ma'akiv each other, they don't prevent each other. What he meant was the order of the brachos doesn't matter. And that's why they could say, we see that because they say avarabba before Yotzer Or. Normally we say Yotzer Or before avarabba. But you see that in this case, they flip the order, and you see that they're not ma'akiv each other. The order is not ma'akiv. The order is not essential. It could be out of order. And if that's the case, then if that is a possible reading of Rabbi Zrika, so then it would come out that everybody agrees that the one bracha that they would say was avarabba, and later they would say Yotzer Or. Okay. Now, the other thing the Brisa said, the Gemara now quotes, that they would say in the Beis HaMikdash, at that time, they would say avarabba, or they would say one bracha, which we're saying was avarabba, and then it said they would read the Aseres HaDibros. V'korin Aseres HaDibros, Shema, V'ayim Shema, V'yomer, Emes V'yatziv, V'avoda, U'birchas Kohanim. So the Brisa said, actually the Mishnah said they would say the Ten Commandments. They would say Shema and V'hayim Shema, the second paragraph, and V'yomer, the third paragraph. Emes V'yatziv, they would say it's true and standing, supported. That's the paragraph after Shema. Avoda, they would say the paragraph of Ritzei from Shemona Esrei, which is that Hashem should accept our karbanos, because that's what they were involved in, bringing the karbanos, the offerings. U'birchas Kohanim, and the Kohanim would bless the people. Or, yeah, they would say a blessing. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Shmuel. Af bigvulan bikshu likros kain. They wanted to also recite the Ten Commandments as part of the order of Shema outside of the Beis HaMikdash as well, in the borders, meaning outside the Beis HaMikdash. Ela shekvar bitlum, but they already nullified them, b'bnei taromes haminin, because of the complaint or the issue of heretics, that basically there would be people who would claim that the only true part of Torah is the Ten Commandments, that which we heard as a prophecy from Hashem. 10 Commandments, and that's it. So they didn't want to give too much sway, too much prominence to the 10 Commandments, because that would make people say, well, the rest doesn't really matter. So originally they didn't want to, they originally, it sounds like they did say the 10 Commandments is part of the order of Shema, but then they nullified that, they got rid of it because of the mistakes that it could lead to. In other words, they were worried about these heretics going and telling people who didn't know better that this is all that matters, the 10 Commandments, and that's it. That's what we heard from God, and everything else was from Moses and is not true. So in order to avoid that claim, they stopped saying the 10 Commandments as part of the order of Shema. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned this in a brayso as well. Rabbi Nassan says, Bigvulin, Bikshu Likros Kain. In the border areas, they also wanted to say Shema, meaning outside the Beis HaMikdash, Elo Shekvar Bitlum, Ibnei Taromas Amina, but they already nullified it because of the claims of the Minin, the heretics. Apparently, there's versions that say of the students of, so Rashi here says Akum, which stands for Ovdei Kocham Mazalos, idol worshippers. Apparently, there were some versions that said Talmidei Yeshu, the students of Yeshu, which would be the Christians. So, different understandings of who we were concerned would make such a claim. Rabbi Bar Brachana Sabar Lem Kavenu Besura. Rabbi Brachana sought to establish the recitation of the 10 Commandments in Surah, in Babylonia. Amarli Rav Chisda said, Kvar Bitlum Ibnei Taromas Aminin. It's already been nullified because of that we're worried about the heretics or the Christians, their claims. Amemer Savar Lem Kavenu Benerda. Amemer wanted to establish it in Nerda. Amarli Rav Ashi said, Kvar Bitlum Ibnei Taromas Aminin. And we've already nullified it because of the Minin, because the heretics were not reenacting this. Okay, then the Mishnah said, Uveshabbos mosifim bracha achas l'mishmar hayotze. On Shabbos there was an additional bracha for the mishmar, or said by the mishmar hayotze, the mishmar, the group of Kohanim that was leaving. So there was a changing of the guard every Shabbos in the afternoon, and the outgoing group of Kohanim would bless the incoming group of Kohanim. My bracha achas, what was the bracha that they would give them? Amar Rabbi Chelbo. Rabbi Chelbo said, Mishmar hayotze omer leMishmar hanichnas. The group that was leaving would tell the one coming in the following blessing: Misha shachan es shmo bebayis hazeh. The one who caused his name to dwell upon this house, upon the Beis HaMikdash, hu yishkon beinechem ava ve'achva ve'shalom b'rayos. He should Yashkin, he should place amongst you love and brotherhood and peace and friendship. That was the bracha that the outgoing Kohanim would tell the incoming Kohanim, that Hashem's presence should bring, he should bring peace and love and the likes. Okay. Then going back to our Mishnah. That was all elaborating on the Mishnah from Tamid. Going back to our Mishnah from 11a, so the Mishnah said that if it telling a place where the rabbis composed a long bracha, you can't do short, you can't do long. If they put a seal, you can't not have the seal on the bracha, and if they didn't put a seal, then you can't add a seal. Now, the Gemara considers the following question. It says, Pshita heicha dikanakit kasa dechamar biyadeh. It says it's obvious, like if you're holding a glass of wine, v'kasavar deshichrahu, and you think it's beer. Now the bracha on wine is hagafen. The bracha on beer is shakol niyab devarot. So you're holding wine, but you think it's beer, which means it's really hagafen. You think it's shakol though. Upasach umevarich adaita deshichra, and you begin your blessing Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, thinking that you're going to make a shakol, because you think this is beer. B'siyim b'dechamer, but then, when you get to the end of the bracha, you realize it's not beer, it's wine. And you say the bracha for wine, Borei Pri Hagafen, Yatsa. The Mishnah said, the Gemara says you'll fulfill the obligation of the blessing. That's a good blessing still. Why? Di'inami im amar shakon yabid varo. Because even if you had taken the mistake to the end and finished the bracha with shakol, yatsa, you're still yotze. If you make a shakol on wine, b'diavad after the fact, you're still yotze. You fulfill the bracha. Dehatna, because it's a Mishnah, al kulam im amar shakol yabid varo yatsa. It's a Mishnah later in Brachos that on all foods, if you make a shahakol, you're still yotze. So being that you had in mind at the beginning that you were going to make a shahakol, because you thought it was beer, really it was wine though, but that it doesn't hurt the bracha because that also would have worked. So it's fine, and he finishes hagafen, the bracha works. Elohecha dekanakit kasa de shichra biyadei. Because but what about, says the Gemara, the opposite case? You're holding beer, which the bracha is shakol, and you think it's wine, which the bracha is hagafen. And you began, you said, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, thinking you were going to make a hagafen on this beer, because you thought it was wine. And then you realize that it's beer, v'siyim b'deshichra. So, and you end off with the bracha on beer. Mai. What would be the halacha in that case? Because if you would make hagafen on beer, it's not a good bracha. You can't make, the one who creates the fruit of the vine on something that's made from wheat, barley, or whatever. So that doesn't work. So you said Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and you finished with the right bracha, shakol yabid varo. But when you began the bracha with shakol, with Hashem, Baruch atah Hashem, you were thinking that you were making a hagafen. So you were making the wrong bracha, but then you caught it at the end. So does that work? B'diavad, after the fact, if you did that, is it a good bracha or do you need a new bracha? So the question is, Mike, basar ikar bracha azlinan or basar chasima azlinan? What do we follow? Do we go by the beginning of the bracha, in which case it's a bad bracha, it's not a good bracha. It was the wrong bracha. You were making a hagafen on beer. Or do we go by the chasima, the seal of the bracha, and the seal was right? In the end you said shakol yabid varo. So what do we follow? Tashma, come and listen as we try to prove from the following brisa. Shachris pasach beyotzer. Let's say a person was davening shachris, and they started to say the bracha of yotzer arav arichoshech. He forms light and creates darkness. But when you got to the end of the bracha, which is supposed to be Yotzer HaMa'oros, V'siyim b'mariv haravim, sorry at the end. You never said Yotzer Ar. It was the morning. You had in mind that you were going to, you say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, thinking you were going to make Yotzer Ar, which would be the right bracha. But you didn't say that. You said the first bracha from Ma'ariv. What's the first bracha from Ma'ariv? Asher bidvaro ma'ariv haravim. That by his word, he turns over evenings. Passes the evenings. So, if you said the words ma'ariv haravim, asher bidvaro ma'ariv haravim, in the morning, lo yatsa, you're not yotze, the bracha before Shema, it's the wrong bracha. Pasach b'mariv haravim, but if, again, it's still the morning, you had in mind you were going to say the wrong bracha, asher bidvaro ma'ariv haravim. You say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, having in mind you're going to make the bracha from ma'ariv of asher bidvaro ma'ariv haravim, v'siyim b'yotzer, but you caught yourself, and in the end you said the right bracha of Yotzer Ar, yatsa, you're yotze, that's good enough. What about the flip case, arvis? What if it's the evening? Pasach b'ma'ariv haravim, you began the bracha having in mind that you would say asher bidvaro ma'ariv haravim, v'siyim b'yotzer Ar, but instead of saying that, you said Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam with that in mind, but then instead of saying asher bidvaro ma'ariv haravim, you said Yotzer Ar at nighttime. Lo yotze, you're not yotze, you said the wrong thing. But pasach b'yotzer Ar, but if you started and had in mind that you were going to say Yotzer Ar, again, it's nighttime. You say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. You have the wrong bracha in mind of Yotzer Ar. V'siyim b'ma'ariv haravim. but you conclude with Mariv Aravim, meaning you say Asher B'Dvara Mariv Aravim, you say the right thing, Yatsa, you're Yotze. That's good enough. Klal Shal Davar, here's the rule, says the Brisa, Hakol Holech Achar Achisam. It all goes by what your sealing is, and how you seal the bracha. So it seems, from here, we seem to have a proof that that it all goes by what you conclude with. All that matters is what you end with. In the morning, if you have the wrong thing in mind, you're playing Asher B'Dvar Mariv Aravim. Or so let's start. In the morning, if you have the right thing in mind, but you say the wrong thing in the end, then you're not Yotze. If you have the wrong thing in mind and in the end you say the right thing, you seal it with the right thing, you're Yotze. And the same thing with the evening. So it seems it goes by what you seal it with. So back to our case of the guy who's holding beer, and he's thinking it's wine, and he says Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, as if he's going to say Agafen, and in the end he catches himself and says Shakol Nya B'Dvaro. It should work because it all goes by what you close with. We seem to have a proof from this brisa. Says the Gemara, it's not a proof. Shani Hasam Dika'amar Baruch Yotzer Hamaoros. There it's different because the bracha in the morning, and at night also you could say a similar thing, but the bracha in the morning, it repeats a bracha at the end. So the bracha in the morning is a long bracha. Yotzer Rav Arichosh Shalom Reis Hakol is not the end of the bracha. It goes on and it goes into Lakel Barachim Zutenu Lamel Chai V'Kayim, and then it goes Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMe'oros. So it actually has a second part to the bracha. So in that case, we're talking about where in the end of the bracha you said the whole bracha correctly. So says the Gemara, you can't prove from here anything because it's a totally different case than our Shahakol Hagafen case. Here, you started off Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, you had the wrong thing in mind. And then you said the right thing, Yotzer Arav Arichoshech. But in the end, you then repeated at the end of the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMa'oros, and there you had the right thing in mind the whole time. So maybe that's why it works. Because there you had a Baruch Atah Hashem with the right thing in mind. But maybe our case, meaning we could dismiss what happened in the beginning because you got to repeat Baruch Atah Hashem. But maybe in our case of the beer, where you don't repeat Baruch Atah Hashem, you had the wrong thing in mind at Baruch Atah Hashem. Even if you close with the right words, maybe it doesn't work. You can't prove anything from the morning bracha where you had a second chance, where you got to say at the end Baruch Atah Hashem with the right thing in mind, and you said Yotzer HaMa'oros. So says the Gemara, Hanichol Rav. That deflection fits according to the opinion of Rav. De Amar, that Rav sets out a rule, Kol bracha she'ein bo haskaras Hashem eina bracha. Shapir. So Rav says, any bracha that doesn't mention Hashem's name is not a bracha. And now this does mention Hashem's name. Baruch Atah Hashem, Yotzer HaMa'oros mentions Hashem's name, Baruch Atah Hashem. So that's a good bracha. So that deflection works because in the end you have a good bracha, and maybe we completely dismiss what happened in the beginning because in the end you end up making a good bracha. Elul Rabbi Yochanan de Amar, but according to Rabbi Yochanan who says, Kol bracha she'ein bo malchus eina bracha, any blessing that doesn't mention kingship is not a blessing. Ma'ikol Meimer, what are you going to say? We seem to have a good proof. Because according to Rabbi Yochanan, you have to mention malchus for it to be a good bracha. And when you conclude Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMa'oros, you don't say anything about kingship. It doesn't say Melech HaOlam there, which means that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the main part of the bracha was what you said at the very beginning, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Yotzer Or. That's where you said Melech HaOlam. That's where you mentioned kingship. And so according to Rabbi Yochanan, that's the main part of the bracha. And yet we say, even though you had the wrong thing in mind, as long as you close it with the right words, it works. So it seems that according to Rabbi Yochanan, we should have a proof from this brisa, from the fact that there, when you had said the main part of your bracha, the bracha that contained malchus, the mentioning of kingship, you had the wrong thing in mind. As long as you closed it out correctly, it was a good bracha. So too, in the case of the beer. even though when you said Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, you had the wrong thing in mind, you thought you were making a gafen. But as long as you closed it out correctly, it should be a good bracha. Says the Gemara, nope, there's still not a good proof from the case of the bracha of Yotzer Or. Ella kivan da Amar Rabba Bar Ula. Since Rabba Bar Ula said, we learned this in the last Amud, that we say the word choshech, Yotzer Or Vari choshech, we mentioned darkness, kedei lahaskir midas yom b'layla, midas layla b'yom, because there's a value in mentioning the night during the daytime, and the day during the nighttime. So ki ka'amar bracha umalchus meikara tarvayu ka'amar. So when you make that original bracha of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and you mention malchus, and that's the main part of the bracha. So in the case of Shachris, even though you're having in mind that you're going to mention Asher b'dvarim Ma'ariv Aravim, you're going to mention the evening, and it's the wrong thing because it's the morning. But it's not really the wrong thing because you anyways have to mention the evening and the morning. That's what he said. We want to mention the night in the daytime. So by having in mind when you start that bracha that you're going to say Asher b'dvarim Ma'ariv Aravim and mention the evening, that's anyways really, you're supposed to be mentioning the evening. So it's not completely off. And the Gemara seems to say, let me make it be a little bit more clear. You having in mind to say Asher b'dvarim Ma'ariv Aravim is not so off because within Asher b'dvarim Ma'ariv Aravim, you also mention the morning. You mention the daytime. Meaning both brachos mention both. So what I believe the Gemara is saying is that you can't compare. Because actually, if you have in mind in the morning, you're going to say the evening bracha, you're not so far off because the evening bracha also mentions the daytime in it. Like we said, Gol el or b'nei choshech, choshech b'nei or, Hashem rolls back the light for the darkness and darkness for the light. You mention the light and the darkness. You mention day and night. So since both are included in each bracha, so having in mind the wrong bracha is not really having in mind the wrong bracha because the wrong bracha also includes the right things, the right components. So that's why in that case, even though you had the wrong thing in mind, as long as you say the right thing in the end, you're good because you didn't really have the wrong thing in mind because the morning bracha, the evening bracha includes the mention of the day and the morning bracha includes the mention of the night. So it's not really having the wrong thing in mind. But if you make a bracha on beer, having in mind that you're making a bracha on wine, you're making a gafen, there's nothing in there that's relevant, and therefore it could be that would not work even though you closed out with the right words. So there's no root proof from there. Says the Gemara, Tashma mi Seifa. Come and listen to the end of the Brisa. Maybe from the second half of the Brisa we can bring a proof. The second half of the Brisa said, Kulalo shel davar. It said, here is the rule. And the Brisa said, just to recount, the Brisa said that if it's the morning and you have the wrong thing in mind, you have the right thing in mind, but you say the wrong thing, you're not Yotzei. It's no good. If you have the wrong thing in mind, but then you say the right thing, you are Yotzei. And the same thing in the evening. And say, Kulalo shel davar, the rule is, everything goes by the seal. If you say the right thing in the end, then it's good. So it says, Kol shel davar kol holech achar achitum. It all follows the seal. Kol shel davar lasu himai. What's that coming to add? You've already told me the rules. So what is making a general rule come to add? Here's the rule. I saw the rules already. So what is summarizing and saying, here's the rule. What are you coming to add with that? Isn't it coming to add a case like our case? The case of the wine and the beer. That if you have beer and you have in mind to make hagafen on it and you end up saying the right thing, it's good because it all goes, here's the rule. It all goes by the seal. So that should be a proof. It should be a proof that it works from the fact that it set out the rule. It all goes by the seal. What was that rule coming to include? It must be coming to include a case like this. Says the Gemara, no, lasui nahama v'tamri. It's coming to include a different side case, which is the case of bread and dates. What's the case of bread and dates? Heichidami, what's the case? Ilema de'achal nahama. Vikasavar de'tamri achal. If we say the case is that a person was eating bread, and somehow they thought they were eating dates. Upasach adaita de'tamri. And so they started the bracha, actually, it's talking about the bracha afterwards. They ate. The person, it's talking about a bracha achrona, a closing bracha, an after blessing. So they ate, the case would be that they ate bread. But for some reason they thought they ate dates, somehow. Upasach adaita de'tamri. So they began to bench, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, thinking that they were going to say the after blessing on dates, which is al ha'etz. Bracha mein shalosh. Al ha'etz v'al pri ha'etz v'al tinu hasadeh. So they thought they were going to make the after blessing on dates. But when they got to Elokeinu melech haolam, they realized, oh no, I'm supposed to bench v'siyem b'denahama. So they closed it with the hazan. Hazan hasalam kulam b'tuah. They went and they benched. Birkas hamazon. Now, if that's the case, Hainu Bayan, that's the same as our case from before. And it would be a good proof. I mean, we're trying to deflect the proof and say, no, it's not our case, it's the case of dates and bread. But if the case is that a person was benching and they were about to say the bracha on al ha'etz, on bread, then they realized it's bread and they said benching, that's just the same type of case as you thought you were about to make hagafeng on beer and you realized you need to make shahakol. That's the same thing. And then it would be a proof, but we're trying to say there's no proof from here because it's just a case of dates and bread. So what is the case of lo tricha? No, we need it for the following. Kagon da'achal tamri, it's the case, the opposite. You didn't eat bread, you ate dates. V'kasavar nahama achal, but you thought you ate bread. Upasach b'denahama, so you started to bench on the bread. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. So you started to bench, and v'siyem b'detamri, but you realized when you got to melech haolam that no, you're not supposed to say birkas hamazon. You're supposed to say mein shalosh al ha'etz, and you said it. Then in that case, yatsa. Now, why is that different? Explains the Gemara. That's different. Da'afilu siyem b'denahama nami yatsa. Because when it comes to dates, if a person would eat dates and then they would say birkas hamazon on dates, they would actually be yotze. Why? My taima? De tamri nami mezan zaini. Dates are considered unique in the halachic perspective because they're mezan zaini. They're very filling. And since dates are very filling, then you could be yotze with the bracha of hazan, the one who sustains. And so it's not the correct bracha, but if you would bench on dates, you'd be yotze. And therefore, that's a totally different case. That's more like our first case of person was drinking wine and started to make shahakol, where we say that even though they had in mind for shahakol, they're still yotze because you can make a shahakol on wine. So to here, our klalo shel davar, the rule over here that's coming, that we always go by what you seal with, is talking about this type of case. The case of, again, similar to that shahakol case, where a person ate dates, they started to say the after blessing thinking they were going to say birkas hamazon. In the end, they said al ha'etz, the correct after blessing, but there they would still be yotze, since if they had benched on the dates, they would have been yotze. So they're also yotze in this case where they meant to bench, and in the end said al ha'gefen, that's not going to be worse. Sorry, al ha'etz, and they'll be yotze with that too. Okay, so in the end, the Gemara never answers the question of what the halacha would be in the case of the person who planned to make a hagafen, hagafen on the beer, and in the end caught themselves and made shakol. It's not clear what the halacha would be in that case. Okay. Amar Rabba Bar Chinana Saba Mishmei de Rav. Rabba Bar Chinana, the elder, said in the name of Rav, Kol shelo amar emes v'yatziv shachris. If you don't say the paragraph of emes v'yatziv after Shema in the morning, ve'emes ve'emuna arbis, and you don't say the paragraph of emes ve'emuna in the evening, lo yatza yidei chovaso. You have not fulfilled your obligation. What obligation have you not fulfilled? It's not so clear. If it's just the obligation of saying these paragraphs, and if you say the wrong one or you don't say them, you're not yotze. What's the proof? Shenemar, as it says in Tehillim, l'hagid ba'boker chastecha ve'emunascha ba'leilos. That in the morning, to tell over your emuna, your faith, in the morning, and in the evening, your chesed in the morning, your kindness in the morning, and your emuna, your faith, in the evening. So, Rashi explains, the bracha of emes v'yatziv, Hashem is true, and yatziv nachon, His word is trusted. That is all about the chesed Hashem does. It says, or did with us and will do with us. He took us out of Egypt, we talk about, and He split the sea. So that's what he did with us. That's the chesed He did in the past. And emes ve'emuna is about the future of what we have emuna. We have faith looking ahead that He's going to fulfill His promise to us and once again redeem us. So they're specific because of the pasuk l'hagid ba'boker chastecha, that in the morning we're to tell over Hashem's chesed, we're to give thanks for the kindnesses of the past, and emes ve'emuna in the evening, because emunascha ba'leilos, your emuna, your faith in you in the nighttime, we look ahead and we have faith in future salvations. V'amar Rabba Barchin l'saba mishmei derav. And another statement that Rabba Barchin is saying in the name of Rav, hamispala kishu koreya. Hamispala, when a person davens Shmona Esrei, kishehu koreya, when you bow, koreya bebaruch, you bow at the word baruch, or that's when you bend. Ukishehu zokef, and when do you stand back up? Zokef b'shem, when you say Hashem's name, really right before. So a person should be erect when they say Hashem's name. Amar Shmuel my taima de Rav. Shmuel said, what is Rav's reason? Tichsiv, because the pasuk says, in Tehillim it says, Hashem zokef kevulim. Hashem lifts up those who are bent over. So I think we're reading it, the name of Hashem lifts them up. So at the name of Hashem we straighten out. Meisvei, the Gemara says, we seem to have a contradiction from another pasuk. It says, in Malachi, it says, Mipnei Shemi nichasu. From before my name, he is frightened, or Rashi says hachna, he's submitted, he's bent. It sounds like for Hashem's name we should be bent, we should be in a position of submission. Says the Gemara, no. Miksev bishmi, does it say with my name you should be bent? You should be submissive? Mipnei Shemi, in the face of my name, meaning before my name, you should be submissive, but once you get to my name, you should be erect again. Mipnei Shemi ksiv. Amar le Shmuel l'chia bar Rav. Shmuel said to Chia, the son of Rav, bar Uryan, son of enlightenment of Torah, Tav emelach milsa ma'al damar buch. I want to tell you something that your father Rav said. Hachi amar avuch, this is what your father said, Kishu Korea, when he bends, Korea bebaruch, he bends at the word baruch, Kishehu zokef, and when he stands up, erect, zokef b'shem, he does that at the name of Hashem, really right before saying the name of Hashem. Top of the next page, Rav Sheshes kikara kara kechizra. When Rav Sheshes would bow, he would bow like a chizra. Rashi says a chizra is a shevet, a staff. And you kind of go like this with the staff, you bang it down. So when he would bow straight down. Kika zakif kechivya. But when he stood up, he would get up like a snake. So Rashi says he would first raise up his head, and then the rest of his body. Otherwise it looks like it's a burden to be bowing. You just get back up straight. So you bow quickly, but you get up slowly. And the way that Rashi expresses that you bow like this, straight down, is really how we bow at Modim. We don't first bend our knees and then bow. So could be it's referring to Modim, or it could be that even the other places where we do bend our knees, but maybe it's saying we should bend quickly. It shouldn't be a slow process. You bend your knees, bend over, and when you get back up, that's more slow to show that it's not a burden for you to be bowing. Okay, we'll pick up from here, Mitzvah Hashem, next time.